Hello. Today we are presenting criminal justice and what it entails. So what is criminal justice? Criminal justice can be defined as the system through which crimes and criminals are identified, apprehended, judged, and punished. The criminal justice system is comprised of three parts. Part 1 is law enforcement. Law enforcement can be seen as the front lines of the criminal justice system. Part 2 is the courts. The courts can be thought of as the part of the criminal justice system where guilt or innocence of a suspect is assessed at trial. Part 3 is corrections. Corrections can be referred to as the administrative part of the criminal justice system due to its application of sentences and enforcement of punishments. So what are the pros and cons of the criminal justice system? The first pro is that, unlike some other countries, in America, if you are accused of a crime, you are innocent until proven guilty. This is a pro due to the fact that if someone is accused of a crime, this could result in further investigation, which could deter wrongful convictions more thoroughly. The first con is right to attorney. Wealthy individuals convicted of a crime can afford better lawyers, therefore having more of a chance of getting away with crime. The second pro is self-incrimination. The Fifth Amendment protects the accused from saying anything or being forced to answer questions which essentially might get them in deeper trouble. The second con is the fact that the Fifth Amendment does not allow one to answer questions by force, can sometimes keep criminals from releasing needed information.
Facts about criminal justice. Components include police, prosecution, judiciary, prisons, probation, and parole. Recidivism rate for American prisoners is 77% within 5 years of being released. 3/4 of people released from prison remain unemployed for about a year because it is difficult attaining a job and being hired. Some goals of the criminal justice system include law enforcement in action, fair justification through the court system, retribution or retaliatory punishment, deterring future crimes, rehabilitating offenders, and making victims heal or families recover. And the 5 pillars of the criminal justice system are law enforcement, the public prosecutor, the judiciary, correctional institutions, and the community.
All right, so now that we have a better understanding of what our criminal justice system entails and kind of the ins and outs of the whole system itself, we wanted to discuss whether or not it is successful. So the question we next asked was, does our current criminal justice system work? And in short, yes, it's doing what it was designed to do. Lawyer and author Alec Cardasani argues that it needs to be understood that the American legal system has never been an institution of radical social change. On the contrary, it's been an instrument of ruling class oppression. People argue that the main goals of the prison system consist of deterrence, rehabilitation, and retribution. Believing that one of the main goals of the criminal justice system is to deter offenders from repeat offenses, meaning that deterrence is an action of discouraging through instilling doubt or fear. Studies actually show quite the opposite. It's unlikely that prisons deter future crime. Prisons are actually recorded to have the opposite effect, creating a competitive environment for inmates to learn more effective crime strategies, as well as desensitizing many to the threat of future imprisonment. According to the National Institute of Justice, almost 44% of recently released prisoners returned before the end of their first year out. About 68% of 405,000 prisoners released in 30 states in 2005 were actually arrested for a new crime within 3 years of their release from prison. And 77% were arrested within 5 years, but by the end of year 9, that percentage reached 83%. Although there are prison programs that have positive effect on inmate rehabilitation, which is defined as the basic idea of rehabilitation through imprisonment is the attempt to change the attitude and behavior of the actual offender. It's still an extremely difficult process. Inmates are segregated from the general public and forced to live in isolation with other people who see crime as a way of life. It's argued that programs like UNICOR encourage prisoners to develop occupational skills, but at slave wages that benefit big corporations instead of focusing on the skill development of the prisoner. If used correctly, programs that encourage education and focus on the mental health of prisoners have better probability of helping them outside of prison, reducing recidivism. Retribution is lastly defined as punishment inflicted on someone as vengeance for a crime or criminal act. This is really the only irrefutable aspect of criminal justice system that works, placing the alleged prisoner out of sight, out of mind, distant from all social interaction with the real world. But is the alleged prisoner who is now facing retribution of his or her crime really worth the time? So the next question we wanted to ask was, who are we really putting away? In theory, our defined and understood justice system sounds fair and respectable. We are desensitized to the idea of putting people away thanks to slogans like, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime, and running under the assumption that those who are put away are harmful to society. But what we sometimes forget to understand is that the system, too, is driven by individuals with their own personal perspective and experiences, unconscious bias and prejudice. We as humans, not just criminals, but authorities, make mistakes too. Through our class, we've seen a handful of examples that demonstrate the danger of prejudice and explicit racism in our own criminal justice system. I wanted to take this time to highlight some of the statistics behind our prison systems. So on the slide here, I just have a few statistics that were actually, even with my knowledge on criminal justice and the unfairness of the skewed system, but were actually still surprising to me. So in 2014, African Americans constituted 2.3 million, or 34% of the total 6.8 million correctional population. African Americans are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rate of whites. The imprisonment rate for African American women is twice that of white women. Though African Americans and Hispanics make up approximately 32% of the population, they comprise 56% of all incarcerated people in 2015. If African Americans and Hispanics were incarcerated at the same rates as whites, prison and jail populations would decline by almost 40%. African Americans and white people use drugs at similar rates, but the imprisonment rate of African Americans for drug charges is almost 6 times that of white people. So are we putting away criminals? Sure. But is it with the fairness that we claim to have? Do we allow those to be innocent until proven guilty, or does the appearance of a person in today's society deem them guilty before the crime is even committed? Lastly, after highlighting all of these inconsistencies within our criminal justice system, we wanted to try and find potential solutions to our current system. So between 1980 and 2015, the number of people incarcerated in America increased from roughly 500,000 to over 2.2 million. Today, the United States makes up about 5% of the world's population and has 21% of the world's prisoners. There is obviously a problem with our justice system, but how do we fix it? To slow the problem of mass incarceration, we need to begin from the source. Those who have the authority to make the arrests. We need to hold police officers, judiciaries, and even just the community accountable. We need to discuss these problems with an open mind and recognize them as just that, problems within our justice system. Our first recommendation was police training. We've decided that a potential solution to our current system is updated police training. With new studies on how to psychologically handle criminals or those in question, officers need an updated training instead of just boot camps or on how to use force. This is not a knock at the police force and to say that all current police officers are incapable of empathy and critical thinking, but in situations of fear and threat, they need to better understand, straight from the academy curriculum, how to successfully defuse a situation. Next, we want to continue to question cases. There are several programs that have the goal of taking people out of a prison who are unfortunately in there for a crime that they didn't commit. Task force like the Innocent Project make it their mission to hear cases from sometimes decades ago who claim to have been unrightfully incarcerated and take fresh eyes to the cases that many others have forgotten about. And lastly, we wanted to aim to rehabilitate to reduce recidivism. Although rehabilitation within the prison systems is difficult with the environment that it comes with crime, it's important to place an emphasis on education. By doing so, you show the possibility of life outside of crime. Maybe reinforce pro-social attitudes and behavior, creating relationships and encouraging discussion of internal emotions and attitudes. Provide offenders with aftercare once they leave the program, because life after prison isn't ever easy. Although this isn't the perfect fix and we don't have all the right answers, we need to continue to question the system and keep the discussion going on how to better this system, which would do nothing but benefit our country as a whole.